Hey guys, welcome back to my Midlife Capers. We're going to move on to part two of the writing process series that I've started. Um, Last time we talked about just some of the basics of how to create a structure that will get you started out on the right foot. But I want to back up a little bit and let's talk about how do you know you even have a good idea? Why is it worth pursuing? Um, Whenever I have someone come to me with a concept, um, and sometimes they're already fairly far down the road on it, um, and sometimes they're just kind of playing with the idea of whether or not they should put some effort into it. One of the things we talk about is looking at what the marketplace is for something. You want to look at maybe do an Amazon search in books for other things that are already published on your topic, and see what kind of conversation is happening there. If it's a fairly common thing that or a trendy topic, you're definitely going to want to do that because you may find that there's so much competition already in the field, and that you're not really adding anything new to what's being discussed. You don't have any new perspectives on it or new angles to bring fresh word to the conversation. Sometimes maybe you do have something a little bit more unique, but because your platform is non existent, um, it's going to be a big challenge for you to enter the market and have any success in getting exposure for your book. So that's something to consider from the beginning, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't actually do your book. It's just good information to have from the start, so maybe I need to consider what I want to say a little bit more and make sure that what I have to say is really well thought out, that that I do have a unique voice for this, or work on building a following for whatever it is you do, and uh, get some exposure for yourself before you go and try to put your book out. So that's one of the first things that I would have people do. The next thing is a lot of times what I get is people saying, I have kind of a unique story. My family and friends have been telling me for years that I should write a book. The reality is everybody has had someone say, "Oh, you have such an interesting story. You should definitely write a book." Um, and again, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't. It just means that you're going to have to spend extra time really thinking about what you have to say and how you want to say it. And what that means is that, um, say, you've had an interesting life. Odds are somebody out there has probably had a fairly similar journey. What makes yours unique is what you've learned from it. What are your takeaways about life experiences in general, or about this particular experience that are going to make it unique. So, for example, my son has a congenital heart defect, and he had 3 surgeries before he was 2, and it was a really challenging and overwhelming experience. And sure, I could probably write a book about that. Um, Even though there are lots of other people who have had children with childhood diseases and lots of surgeries and hospitalizations and that kind of thing, who also have a similar experience. So, mine isn't necessarily super unique. What would make it a book that's worth reading would be if I gained some insights about, let's see, parents interacting with the healthcare industry to advocate for their children when they're too young to vocalize what they're feeling and experiencing and that kind of thing, so we can learn how to provide better care for that. So something like that might be a way to take my not necessarily super unique experience, um, and introduce part of the conversation that maybe hasn't been had before. So and obviously I'm not planning to do a book like that, um, but that just gives you an example of how you can, if you do feel you have had some unique experiences, or um, at least some interesting experiences for your life, on how to drill down into what really might be best for you to focus on in telling that story. And then the next thing that I would ask a client is, why do you think you are the person to deliver that message? And once again, issue the caveat. It doesn't mean that you're not the person to do it. It's just a question you need to ask yourself, so that you get really clear on why you're pursuing this. Is it just because you're trying to get people off your back because they keep telling you, oh, you should write a book? Is it because you have this idea that, well, maybe I could make a little money off of this, and and get some notoriety, or help propel something else I'm doing by drawing attention? If that is your motive, then I'm going to give you a big reality check really quickly. There are very few people who write books who actually make a living off of them. Even fewer who make enough of a living where that's what they can focus on without having something else to do. And most people are probably not even going to recoup their expenses on writing books, and that's just a difficult reality of it. So you have to decide: is this a passion project, something that I just feel really led to do, and am I willing to make that investment, knowing that I may not get it back, but I can't not do this. So those are some important things to get clear in your mind before you go forward. Okay, so now most of that applies to nonfiction, as far as the examples I was giving, but the same is going to be true for fiction, and especially for fiction, I think, because you know if depending on the genre you're going into, you're probably not going to have any really different ideas, because pretty much everything under the sun has already been written. And bringing in my little caveat, that doesn't mean you shouldn't write it. Because in the same way that I was saying, if you have a unique voice about your experience in writing something, or a takeaway that is maybe something that no one else has highlighted or focused on, the same is true for fiction, because every novel is going to have some kind of connecting points for the reader, and there's going to be, or any good novel is going to have some kind of a takeaway. You're reading about this stuff. Walker Percy once said that the role of fiction, particularly his own, was to show man something of himself that he knows but doesn't know he knows. And I think if you can look back on the different novels that you've read, whether school or for pleasure, there's always something in there that you're like, that's worth thinking about. Or you watch the way characters interact and engage with their lives, and you're like, oh no, that's don't go in that room, and usually if you stop long enough, you can see some kind of parallel in your own life, where you either made the same mistake and learned from it, or you might be heading into that same kind of mistake, and it's a good cautionary tale for you. But regardless, um, the, every facet of romance, of family interaction, every aspect of business and politics, and all of those things have pretty much been covered in one book or another. In fact, I had a professor in school who used to say that every story ever told was covered in the Bible first, which is really kind of true. It's kind of like an anthology of the human condition, and it tells what you know what happens when you make the wrong choices and when you make the right choices on the various challenges you encounter as a human. So all of that was to say that um, the story itself may not, or the fundamental core piece of the story may not be that much different, but what's different is your take on it, your particular way of telling the story, the the color that you put into it, and that is where it may resonate for one reader and not another, and where one person may have had an experience that they didn't fully understand, and in reading one book, it didn't help them any, but the same thing covered just in a little bit different way by a different author um, can totally speak to them. It's just one of the beautiful things about writing and communicating through the written word, and why we continue to do it even though visual mediums still are thriving, and why we do spend so much time on our screens. We still go to books. We still feel compelled to write books. I hope with these insights that you won't be discouraged from writing, but that you will find ways to get at the real encouragement and drive for what you want to put to paper. Anyway, I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.